Well, I mean, I think just, not taking for granted and just, being in the moment of us being on the floor once again. That's two games back to back, playing meaningful minutes and him also making another play. Obviously they was making a run in that second quarter, and they did make a run in that second quarter. But, just for me, I just always made the right play. I got doubled, and he was able to make, fake the pass to the corner and then knock down the three. So definitely a cool moment, for us and also for our family.
Nikola Jokic is doing something right now that nobody in the history of this league has ever done the way he is doing it. And the crazy part is that most people are watching it happen every single night and still not fully grasping how rare and how special it actually is. We talk about greatness in basketball all the time. We throw around names like Jordan and LeBron and Kobe and Shaq. We debate who was better, who had the better team, who had the harder path. But with Jokic, the conversation is different. It is not just about greatness. It is about a kind of greatness that does not fit into any box we have ever used before. He is doing things with a 7-foot body that guards do not even do. He is controlling games without running fast or jumping high or doing anything that looks athletic in the traditional sense. And somehow, every single night, the game just bends to him. That is what we need to talk about today. Before we get into Jokic specifically, we need to understand something about basketball that has always been true. This sport, more than almost any other team sport in the world, has always been defined by the relationship between a superstar and the players around him. You can be the greatest player alive, but without the right pieces alongside you, championships stay out of reach. That is just how it works. Michael Jordan is the most celebrated player in NBA history. 6 titles, 6 Finals MVP awards, one of the most famous careers the sport has ever seen. But Jordan needed Scottie Pippen. Without Pippen locking down the other team's best player, without Pippen facilitating the offense when Jordan needed rest, without Pippen being an all-star in his own right, those 6 championships do not happen. Jordan himself has acknowledged this. Pippen was not a supporting actor in some small movie. He was a co-star in one of the greatest runs in NBA history. LeBron James is another perfect example. For years, people have debated whether LeBron is the greatest of all time. He has won championships with 3 different franchises. He has been to the finals more times than most players dream about. But every single time he lifted that trophy, there was another major star right there with him. In Miami, he had Dwayne Wade, who at that point was a former champion himself and one of the most complete guards in the league. Then he came back to Cleveland and won the title with Kyrie Irving, who delivered one of the most clutch shots in NBA Finals history. Then, in Los Angeles, he won alongside Anthony Davis, who was one of the most dominant big men of his generation. That pattern is not a coincidence. It is the formula. Every great dynasty in NBA history follows the same blueprint. One superstar at the top, backed by at least one other all-star caliber player who makes the whole thing work. That is how titles get won. That is how banners get raised. That is how legacies are built. Stephen Curry changed the way basketball is played. The three-point revolution he started is still reshaping how teams build their rosters and run their offenses. He is arguably the greatest shooter in the history of the sport. But even Curry, with all that ability to score from anywhere on the floor, needed the Golden State dynasty around him to win championships. He had Klay Thompson, who on his own was a 2-time All-Star and one of the best shooting guards of his era. He had Draymond Green, a player so intelligent and so important to how that team functioned that many people believe Golden State does not win those titles without him. Even Shaquille O'Neal, who was physically one of the most dominant forces the NBA has ever seen, needed Kobe Bryant to make it all work in Los Angeles. And later, when he went to Miami, he needed a young Dwayne Wade to push him over the top. The pattern never breaks. Every legend, without exception, needed someone. And then there is Nikola Jokic. That is where the conversation completely changes, because when you look at what Jokic has built in Denver and how he has built it, the pattern that holds for every other legend starts to fall apart. Jokic did not win his championship. The difference is that with most superstars, the team still needs to be built around them carefully. You need specific pieces to make it work. You need complementary stars who can handle the moments the superstar cannot handle alone. What Jokic does is something genuinely different. He makes the team construction question simpler, because whoever's standing next to him plays better than they would anywhere else. Guys who were role players on other teams become rotation stars with the Nuggets. Guys who had inconsistent offensive games suddenly look reliable. Guys who had question marks over their ability to perform in big moments suddenly find the right shot because Jokic created it for them at exactly the right time. It is not just that he makes his teammates better in a general sense, which is something good playmakers do all over the league. It is that he makes them better in ways that feel like they could not have been coached. It feels natural. It feels like the right basketball play appearing out of thin air. He is like seasoning in a dish. Once you add him, everything just works better. Everything clicks. Everything fits in a way it did not before he was there. That is the quality that puts him in a conversation with the all-time greats, and in some ways puts him above the comparison entirely. Because you cannot fully compare Jokic to most legends using the same framework. The framework assumes a superstar who needs another superstar. Jokic does not fully fit that assumption. He is his own category. He is the guy who makes the people around him so much better that the question of who else is on the team becomes almost secondary. That has never been true of any center in the history of the NBA. It has been true of certain point guards at certain moments, but from the center position, with a 7-foot body that is supposed to be used for posting up and setting screens and blocking shots, doing it the way Jokic does it is genuinely without historical precedent. The conversation about where exactly he ranks among the all-time greats will go on for years. People will argue about championships and MVPs and teammates and eras. That is the nature of these debates, and honestly, those debates are part of what makes basketball fun to follow. But one thing that is becoming harder and harder to argue against is that Jokic is currently the best player in the world, has been one of the best players in the world for the better part of a decade, and has done it in a way that nobody else has done before. The game is genuinely different because of him. Teams have had to rethink how they defend centers. Teams have had to think differently about how they use their biggest players on offense. The ripple effects of what he does on the court extend beyond just the Denver Nuggets. He is changing how coaches and front offices and players think about what a center can be. When people in 50 years look back at this era of basketball and try to explain who was the most interesting player to watch, who was the hardest to stop, who was the most creative and complete and impossible to fully contain, the answer that keeps coming up is going to be the big Serbian guy from Denver who did not look fast, did not look athletic, did not look like anything special from a distance, but who somehow controlled every game he played and made everyone around him better in ways that changed the sport forever. That is the Jokic story, and the truly wild part is that it is still being written. He is still out there, every single night, doing things that do not make sense. The numbers keep climbing, the records keep falling, the highlights keep making people look twice and ask out loud what they just watched. This is not a player in decline. This is not a player coasting on past glory. This is a player still in the middle of what might be the most statistically complete run any center has ever had in the history of professional basketball. And somehow, a significant portion of the basketball conversation is still not fully treating it that way. People are distracted by the noise, by the stars who play in bigger markets, by the players who have louder personalities and more viral moments. But the scoreboard does not lie. The advanced metrics do not lie. The wins do not lie. Nikola Jokic is changing the NBA right now, and the most honest thing you can say about it is that the full weight of what he is doing has not been appreciated the way it deserves to be. Not yet, but it will be. When this era is done and people look back with clear eyes and no distraction, the truth of what happened here is going to be very hard to argue with.
To be eligible for major individual awards like the MVP, a player has to appear in at least 65 out of 82 regular season games and play meaningful minutes in those games. The league put this rule in place to address load management, the growing practice of teams resting healthy star players to preserve their energy for the playoffs. On paper, the motivation makes sense. Fans pay full price to see the best players, and they deserve to see them play. But the way this rule was written creates a problem that is bigger than the one it was trying to solve. Because now the question is not just who is the best player. The question becomes who played in enough games to qualify for the award, and those are two very different questions. Jokic has missed games this season, not because he was managing fatigue or trying to coast through the regular season. Players miss games for all kinds of reasons: illness, injury, personal matters. And under this rule, all of that counts the same way. If you do not hit 65 games, you are out of the race, regardless of what you did in the games you actually played. That changes the meaning of the award in a fundamental way, and it hits a player like Jokic harder than almost anyone else because he is already the kind of player who does not dominate headlines, who does not generate the loudest noise, who depends on people actually watching and analyzing his games carefully to understand just how good he is. What makes the 65-game rule feel even more frustrating is the current moment Jokic is having on the basketball court. He is once again putting together a season that would have been MVP-worthy in almost any other era of the league. He is breaking records. He is controlling games. He is doing things that make even people who have watched basketball for decades stop and look twice. There are moments in Jokic games where the play that just happened seems impossible, where a pass gets made that no 7-footer has any business making, where a double team collapses on him and somehow he finds the one shooter in the one spot that makes the defense completely fall apart. Those moments happen multiple times every single game he plays. And yet there is a real possibility that because of a rule about games played, he could be pushed out of the MVP conversation entirely, not because of his performance, but because of a box that was not checked. The best player in the league might once again not win the award that is supposed to go to the best player in the league. And this time it would not be voter fatigue or narrative, it would be a rule. Here's something that makes Jokic stand apart from almost every other superstar in the modern game. He genuinely does not seem to care that much. Other stars in this league have made it very clear that awards matter to them. They talk about it. They acknowledge the competition. They note when they feel they were snubbed. That energy is normal and understandable. These are highly competitive people who have worked their whole lives to be the best. But Jokic moves differently. People who have been around him, who have played with him, who have sat across from him in interviews and press conferences, they all describe the same thing. He is not chasing headlines. He is not counting votes. He is not watching to see what people are saying about him after games. He just wants to win basketball games. He loves the game itself, the chess match of it, the creativity of it, the way a perfectly executed play makes everyone on the floor work together the way it was supposed to. That is what drives him. Jeff Teague, someone who has been around the NBA for a long time and has seen all kinds of players up close, has talked about how Jokic's approach to the game is just different. The obsession is not with individual success, it is with the game. It is with winning. It is with making the right play, even when the wrong play would look better on a highlight reel or generate more buzz on social media. That kind of mentality is rare in a league where attention and recognition are currency. Most stars want to be the story. Jokic just wants to play. And the irony is that by just playing, he ends up being the story anyway, because nobody else is playing at the level he is playing at. Let us step back and look at the big picture for a moment, because the full meaning of what Jokic has done and continues to do is important to understand in context. Basketball is a team sport. We say that all the time. 5 players on the floor, working together, executing a
points, rebounds, assists, and steals. Not 2, not 3, 4. That kind of across-the-board production is extraordinarily rare. You can go back and look at every great player in NBA history and find players who dominated in 2 areas, maybe 3, but 4 categories simultaneously as a center, while also being the most efficient player in the league? The only name that comes anywhere close to that kind of all-around control is Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And even Kareem, one of the greatest players to ever play the game and the all-time leading scorer in NBA history, did not dominate across this many statistical areas at the same time in the same way. That is not a criticism of Kareem. It is a statement about just how unusual what Jokic is doing actually is. His player efficiency rating, his box plus minus, his value over replacement, his win shares, every single advanced statistical